Picture this, it's a strangely warm January day in Boston, 1919. Out of nowhere, a bizarre industrial disaster strikes that will literally change American law forever. It's an incredible story of corporate greed, some fascinating science, and a huge legal battle, all set in motion by a 20-foot-high wave of molasses. So, just after noon on January 15th, a massive storage tank holding 2.3 million gallons of molasses just explodes. And what came pouring out wasn't fire or shrapnel. It was a tidal wave of thick, sticky goo that just surged through the streets, leaving behind this scene of complete and utter devastation. For the first responders who arrived, the scene was something straight out of a nightmare. The Boston Post, I think, captured the horror of it perfectly. It was this suffocating, inescapable mess. People and animals were trapped, and the more they struggled, the deeper they sank. It's just horrifying to imagine. And, you really have to forget any idea of a slow ooze here. The power behind this wave was immense. We're talking about a 25-foot-high wall of molasses, moving at an incredible 35 miles per hour. That's powerful enough to rip buildings right off their foundations and even buckle the steel girders of a nearby elevated railway. The human cost was just staggering. In the end, 21 people lost their lives. Another 150 were injured. This wasn't just some freak accident, it was a major catastrophe, and it left the entire city asking one very urgent question. How could this have possibly happened? Well, in the chaos right after the flood, the tank's owner, a company called United States Industrial Alcohol, or USIA for short, they had an answer ready to go. They claimed it wasn't their fault at all. No, they said it was saboteurs. USAI's story was perfectly designed to play on the fears of the time. You have to remember, this was the height of the first Red Scare. There was this intense paranoia about immigrants, about communists, and especially about Italian anarchists. And the company spent a ton of money, over $50,000, trying to push this theory. But as investigators and later on the courts began to sift through the actual evidence, that whole anarchist theory started to fall apart. A very different and frankly much more disturbing story started to come out. One that wasn't about political terror, but about plain old corporate negligence. So the whole investigation pivoted. Instead of asking who could have done this, they started asking what failed. And it became pretty clear that the real culprit wasn't a person, but the tank itself. The wreckage really told the true story. I mean, there were no telltale signs of a bomb blast anywhere. Instead, you had these massive, twisted metal plates wrapped around the railway, which pointed to only one thing: a catastrophic structural collapse that came from the inside. The evidence against USCI was just damning. The tank had leaked so badly right from the moment it was built that local kids would actually come by and collect the drips in cups for a free snack. And instead of fixing it, what did the company do? They just painted the tank brown to hide the stains. On top of that, the steel was too thin, it didn't have enough manganese to make it strong, and the rivet holes weren't reinforced. Just a laundry list of shoddy construction. Okay, this part is almost hard to believe. They were in a huge hurry to build this thing. There was a tight wartime deadline to produce industrial alcohol for munitions. So the manager in charge did a so-called safety test by filling the 50-foot-high tank with just 6 inches of water. 6 inches! When the very bottom didn't leak, he declared the entire thing good to go. A modern engineering analysis just confirms what the court later found. The tank was built with what's called a factor of safety of just 1.5. Standard practice at the time required a factor of 3.0. It was literally built with less than half the strength it needed. Just a blatant and ultimately fatal disregard for basic engineering standards. But all right, even with a disastrously faulty tank, there was still one mystery that really puzzled investigators. We all know molasses is thick, it's slow. So how on earth did it move fast enough to cause this level of destruction, especially in the cold of a Boston January? Exactly. I mean, that's the saying, right? Slow as molasses in January. This paradox was really at the heart of why the disaster was so deadly. If it had just been a slow ooze, people could have gotten away, but it wasn't. And understanding why gets us into some pretty fascinating physics. The answer is that molasses is what's called a non-Newtonian fluid. It's just like ketchup. Its viscosity, or its thickness, isn't constant. It changes under stress. But for molasses, the key factor wasn't shaking it, it was all about temperature. So, researchers believe this perfect storm of temperatures was the key. See, a recent delivery of warmer molasses was sitting on top of the older, colder liquid in the tank. When it burst, the initial wave was driven by pure weight and gravity. But as it surged out into the cold winter air, it cooled rapidly, which can triple its viscosity and turn it into that deadly, inescapable trap. So a modern analysis actually breaks the flood down into 3 stages. First, you have the slumping collapse. Second is the inertia phase, where the sheer gravity and volume of 2.3 million gallons drives the wave forward at that incredible 35-mile-per-hour speed. And finally, you get the viscous stage, where it rapidly cooled, thickened, and became that inescapable, sticky trap that the rescuers found. So, with the engineering flaws exposed and the scientific mystery solved, the fight moved from the streets of Boston right into the courtroom. And it sparked one of the most important legal cases in the history of Massachusetts. And this was an epic legal battle. A total of 125 different lawsuits were all rolled into one massive class action suit. The whole thing dragged on for years, involved testimony from over 3,000 witnesses, and created a court record of nearly 45,000 pages. Just incredible. Then, after 6 long years, the court-appointed auditor delivered his verdict. He completely threw out the anarchist sabotage theory and found USIA 100% liable. He pointed to the shoddy construction, the ignored warnings, and the fundamental structural failures as the sole cause of the disaster. In the end, USIA was forced to pay out more than $600,000 in damages and settlements. Now, in today's money, that's over $8 million. It was a huge moment where a corporation was finally held financially accountable for its negligence. And this, right here, is why this disaster is still so important today. The verdict kicked off a whole new era of regulation. In Boston and then across the country, new laws were passed requiring that professional engineers and architects had to review and literally sign off on all major construction plans. It established a precedent for corporate accountability that we all rely on to this day. The cleanup itself took weeks. They had to pump salt water from the harbor just to wash the sticky mess away. But the memory, and even the smell, it lingered. For decades, residents swore that on hot summer days, you could still catch the faint, sweet scent of molasses in the North End. The Great Molasses Flood is such a bizarre, but also a really powerful reminder that the safety regulations we often take for granted are written in the ink of tragedy. And it leaves us with a critical question to think about. What events happening now are forging the rules that will protect future generations?